It is so good to be reunited with you once again on stage, Well.
Yeah, when was that last time? I don't remember.
It was at least about 4 years ago, because I moved over to America then. And what I wanted to get a sense of from our audience, so please, polls out, phones out. I know you're taking the odd photo, Will, but then let's also get voting. I want to know how much you are currently ordering your food, your groceries, via an app. Because I think I saw about 3 or 4 bikes just on my little cycle ride over here from the Bloomberg office. So clearly people are doing it. But are you doing it at least 3 times a week? At least once a week? Perhaps never. How much do you average?
It's a lot.
Every day? Maybe one day out?
No, it's definitely every day, and it's multiple times a day.
Wow. Well, if it ain't broke.
I mean, I don't just order restaurant food, though. I order groceries and things like that. I do cook a little bit.
And that, of course, has been the expansion of what you offer with Deliveroo. When we first were sitting down together, it was higher-end restaurants. Then it became ubiquitous restaurants. Out of interest, what was your last order, do you think?
My last order today was a place called Salad Project for lunch.
Okay, very healthy.
It's great. You should try it out.
Okay, I will while I've got my one more day here. Here we are. I want to start seeing what we're getting from the polls. But on average, your user is what?
Never. Wow.
Who is that?
That means
44% never use an app?
Either, it's an opportunity or I'm embarrassed. I don't know.
This is your time to market hard. The pros are clear in terms of usefulness and ease. At least 3 times a week is about 10%, always shifting a little. 40% are doing it at least once a week. How are you seeing your consumer within this global context, within an inflationary environment, within what has been a difficult consumer environment, sticking with the product?
I think it completely depends on the market and within the market, which demographic, right? Okay. What we've seen since COVID was basically frequency went up around 10 to 15% a year for the first 8 years of our business.
Yeah.
And it sounds predictable, but actually it's the efforts of the team building on the consumer value proposition. So we're not standing still, but it was very consistent, the frequency increase. And then during COVID, it went like this, much more. And since then, we've given back, some of those gains, but we're still well above where we were pre-COVID. But I think what happened is, as COVID unwound, we then also were hit with a extremely high inflation on the food side. So in some of our markets, you've had food inflation 3x that of wage inflation. So the UK was in that position probably about 9 months ago. Now some of that's subsided. And so if you look at that, for many people, what was, I think, a regular purchase sort of became discretionary.
Yeah.
But for people who maybe are in London or in more affluent areas, it's persisted, right? And so what really we've seen is, as inflation has slowed down for food, we're starting to see more and more recovery, which is good. But it's tough when it's 3x that of wage inflation, right?
You've also, though, seen improvements, as you say. You weren't standing still. You've made changes to the app.
Yeah.
Like what? How have you?
Well, I'd say the big one's grocery, right? It's over 11% of our business now. We've built that over kind of 3 to 4 years from a standing start, so that's been really great. We've built some dark stores called Hop, which is a complement to our grocery business. We've done a lot of different things, but I think the thing I'm probably most proud of in the last 12 months is just a series of really sort of, I'd call them incremental improvements to our service reliability. So for example, a better new user address flow, or for example, a better handover when the rider shows up to really minimize—
Getting a code, for example.
Yeah, like a code, right? To minimize these sort of like errors that can happen. And the cumulative impact of those are very, very large. And the collective creativity it takes to actually do all of those things, to me, is as important as the shiny new thing like, grocery or rolling out pharmacy.
Or the shiny new thing on everyone's lips right now, which is AI.
Yep.
I mean, have you inherently been an AI company for ages? You just haven't been, it wasn't sexy, so you didn't so much talk about it.
I don't know if I can go that far, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a question we get asked a lot about, and we've been definitely utilizing Gen AI. So.
In what way?
I think a few different ways. We have in our employee version of the app a recommendation engine, so you can type, I want, a healthy Mexican sort of, meal or within this caloric range. You can type something. It doesn't always work, if I'm honest, but it gives
iterating.
It is iterating, and it comes back with what are increasingly better and better recommendations. That's one thing we're doing on the consumer side. I think on the customer care side, we've done a lot of really cool things where Gen AI will summarize the last 10 interactions with a consumer and then tell the agent, hey, do we think this consumer's happy? And what's a summary of how the last few interactions went without having to look all the stuff up yourself? I think something like that's been really, really powerful.
How have you been able to iterate, to have the confidence to invest within the business when, as we've talked of all day, regulation hasn't been that clear for AI? I mean, goodness, you built your company in a world where gig economy regulation wasn't that clear. Is it just something that as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a CEO of public and private, you just have to keep building until, and the road will form in front of you?
I don't think when I started this business, I had no idea it would be, this large, would be in this many markets. And so there's always a path that's, a bit uncertain. But I think if you're very clear in what you're trying to do, you just go for it and then you sort of adapt.
I hope that people in the audience are doing their questions, suggestions as well. You can do that through the QR code, #Bloomberg Tech, if you want to be sharing some of your thoughts online as well. The regulatory environment is one that's interesting, in large part because, of course, as a gig economy, many were worried about labor. But what's labor been like for you in where inflation goes through the roof, more than wage inflation?
Yeah.
But we've also got very low unemployment. I mean, I know it's ticking up at the moment. One of the most read stories on the Bloomberg today is about UK jobs and sort of starting to be more jobless. But has it been tight for riders in particular?
So what's been interesting for us, and this is the UK, in the tightest labor market the UK's seen pretty much since the lifting of restrictions, we've had the highest rider retention that we've had. We've had over 10,000 applications a week for people to work.
10,000 a week?
To work on our platform, 10,000 a week. And I think the thing that's interesting is these riders could get a job anywhere else, right? You could go work at a pub. You could go work at a warehouse. You could go work in hospitality. And they're choosing to work with us. And to me, that is just quantitative proof that what we're doing, the riders want, as opposed to an opinion. And I think that's something we're really proud of.
Where I'm currently sat over in America, the big hand-wringing about AI has been jobs. And I'm actually interested that someone from the audience said, will we see robots deliver our food in London? How much are you thinking about automation when it comes to riders, to delivery?
I don't think it's going to happen for some time. I think, maybe in more rural areas, maybe places with less population density, that could be a thing. But the UK, at the end of the day, outside of villages, is a highly densely populated place, as are the major markets we're in France, Italy, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, places like that. So I don't see that kind of happening anytime soon. We definitely spend time, talking to different robotic players, but it's kind of been something we've been talking about for like 8 years at this point. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, so not big area of investment, clearly. What is an area of investment is your global reach, and you just outlined the markets you're in.
Yeah.
What has been the differences between a France, a Dubai, vis-a-vis a UK? Are there different trends, or do the consumers seem pretty similar?
They all really like burgers. I can absolutely tell you that. Outside of that, I think how you speak to them, how they react to a loyalty program, they're sort of what they care about in terms of, is it price they care more about? Is it fast service? That differs, I think, significantly, but not just within our portfolio, but within countries ourselves, right? So the neighborhood I started the business in, Chelsea and London, I think people behave very differently there than, say, Didsbury up in Manchester, right? For example. So it's really geographically distinct, and we're a hyper-local business, right? We connect riders, merchants, and consumers that are typically within a neighborhood. And so they have pretty different ways of behaving.
So do you have talent spread throughout the UK and indeed your global markets, or do you tend to have the hub purely in London and then you're gaining insights largely through data rather than on the food?
Well, we gain, it's mostly through data, right? It's not necessarily on the ground. We have teams everywhere, but they're not necessarily talking to every single customer, but we can see what people purchase, we can see the different trends, we can see impacts on retention and frequency, and I see a question about, customer lifetime value. You can see differences that happen to that when you make changes or not.
What is the customer lifetime value? How long do people tend to the consistent numbers of millions that you have using the product, are they always the same millions? Are you moving and ebbing and flowing?
So we have around 7.5 monthly active users. And in that, it's not always the same people in that monthly active user calculation, because some drop out or maybe they purchase 3 months later and then some come back in. But I think, I definitely think that, in terms of, is it really this question we're talking about, or the lifetime value, or?
Yeah. How does one become a lifetime? Can you see that people joining you at Gen Z are aging through your products, sticking with it?
Our customers that joined us in that, I think it's our second year, 2014 in London, on average purchase now 130 times a year.
Wow.
So pretty high. They're early adopters. They probably are more affluent, but it's still a really high engagement number.
Yeah.
And then, I think our cohorts are really pretty predictable. You have people that join sort of by month 3 or 4, you kind of know who's going to stick around, and they have varying degrees of frequency.
Yeah.
But you can kind of figure it out. But again, it's not us sitting around doing nothing. It's adding a lot to the consumer value proposition.
You add by your talent, by the people that you've hired. How is the talent pool in the UK vis-a-vis other markets? How do you feel about remaining very committed as a UK-based business?
We started in London, right? We're HQ'd in London. We're listed in London. I mean, we're 100% committed. And actually, I think sometimes, you read the media and the UK gets a bit of a negative rap. But I think we've been obviously very happy with the talent we've been able to hire here. And we've built a global business out of London.
And actually, you mentioned the IPO, and indeed the wealth of talent you've had. Some of them go off and they build other businesses, right? I mean, how much are you seeing this ecosystem, this flywheel, actually become built in the UK?
I think one of the things I'm most proud of is we've had over 50 people leave Deliveroo to start other businesses. Some of them small, some of them large, but I really admire it when someone goes out on their own and puts it all out there and takes on a risk. And, I think we've been able to provide an example, I think, to people of how it, not that we do everything great, but I think, we're at a certain scale, we're public, it's an example. You've had other UK companies that have gone public as well to show people that it can be done. And I think more examples of that are super beneficial to creating an environment where people feel more comfortable taking risks here.
How has it been being the CEO of a public company?
It's been 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years. I think what I really like about being public is it instills a level of discipline in you that is very, I think it's different than private markets. And I think the other thing it does is it puts you on a schedule, right? Because you have your quarterly, earnings calls, you've got your full year results, your half year results, and so you're always sort of out there. I think the things that are maybe I don't like as much is you are there in the public.
You're doing these things.
No, I always enjoy doing these with you, Caroline, and that's not what I mean. I just mean that you're always in the media, you're always on. And it's not that I don't necessarily like that or not, but I don't much rather be focusing on the user, right? Building things for our consumers.
It's interesting. Someone says, "Do you consider yourself successful?" Now, I don't want to go into sort of a self-help podcast here, but
I don't even know where you're going with this. What?
Yeah. Do you see yourself as successful? Do you still feel that there's so much more to do before you hit the level that you want to achieve as an individual?
I didn't see this one coming. I think I'm proud of what we've done. I'm really proud of what we do for the customer and the riders and the merchants. I think we are early in what we're doing. I don't really judge success personally by output metrics. I care a lot about input metrics. I care a lot about the journey that we've been on, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been 11 years, right?
Yeah.
And we've accomplished a lot. And there's still a long way to go, though.
As an independent company?
As an independent company?
Yeah, well, there's every now and then the analysts, they love to write that you'd be a good M&A target for someone. I mean, good, you took such an amount of money from one key player in the tech ecosystem, Amazon, that everyone wondered whether you'd be purchased. Is that something you think about much?
I focus myself on the users. That's really what I focus on day in and day out. Of course, I pay attention to what happens in the markets and what people say. But at the end of the day, I think you position yourself in the best position, and the company positions itself the best if we're really doing well by our merchants, our riders, and our consumers.
You've just become a UK citizen.
Yeah.
Only,
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Why have such belief in this market, in this country?
It's really weird. I was at the citizenship ceremony, and it didn't really kind of kick in for me until they said I had to pledge allegiance to the king, but then also his heirs and descendants. That's when it kicked in for me, and I was like, oh, I get it now. Okay,
yeah, you're fully signed up.
Okay, yeah. No, look, I've been here 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? I absolutely love the UK. I love London. I think, it's one of the world's greatest cities, and I'm really proud to be a citizen.